Right now, a cut on your body is sealing itself, and you never told it to. 40,000 years ago, that same cut could have killed you, and yet they lived. The first doctor was never in a building. It was inside them. Fever, pain, clotting, all on its own. Then they went further. Willow bark, the first aspirin. Neanderthals chewing antibiotic mold. They even drilled into skulls. And most survived. And the strongest medicine of all? Each other. Here's the twist. That ancient doctor never left. It is still in you, running rules from a world that is gone. And it all starts with something so small. You have already forgotten it is there. Right now, somewhere on your body, there is a small cut you have already forgotten about. A paper edge, a corner of a box. You barely noticed. And while you sit here, it is closing itself. You did not tell it to. You could not stop it if you tried. 40,000 years ago, that same tiny cut could have killed you. No stitches, no antibiotics, no pharmacy at the end of the street. A scrape could go bad and take a whole person with it. And yet your ancestors lived through that cut, and a broken leg, and a rotten tooth, and childbirth, and infections that would put you in a hospital today. They did it for hundreds of thousands of years. Some of them lived into their 70s. So how did anyone survive when the nearest doctor was 100 centuries away? The answer is stranger than they were tough. The first doctor did not live in a building. It lived inside them. And it is still inside you, running the exact same emergency kit right now while you watch this. Let me show you the kit. Start with that cut. The moment your skin opens, you launch a response you will never consciously feel. Tiny cells rush the gap and get sticky. A mesh of protein threads weaves across the wound like a net. In minutes, a plug. In a day, a scab. Nobody taught your ancestors to clot. The ones who could not simply were not anyone's ancestors. Every human alive is descended from a long line of very good bleeders who stopped bleeding on time. Now the pain. We treat pain like the enemy. But pain is a splint you cannot ignore. It grabs the broken part of you and says, do not use this. Stop walking. Stop touching. Let it heal. There are people, a handful in the whole world, born unable to feel pain at all. It sounds like a superpower. It is a death sentence. They break bones they keep walking on. They miss the burn, the infection, the appendix. They tend to die young. Pain kept your ancestors off the leg, long enough for the leg to knit. Pain is the body shouting the same instructions a doctor would give you. Then, fever. When you get sick, your body does something that feels insane. It makes you hot. It spends precious energy to cook itself. Why would a starving hunter waste fuel to raise their own temperature? Because heat is a weapon. Many of the invaders that want to kill you cannot handle it, and your immune system moves faster warm than cold. Fever is not the illness. Fever is the counterattack. Your ancestors did not have a word for it. Their bodies just turned up the heat and went to war. And the swelling. A wound goes hot, red, puffy. That is not damage. That is the rescue crew arriving. Blood and immune cells flood the site to wall it off and clean it out. It is ugly, and it hurts, and it is exactly what is supposed to happen. There is more, and it is quieter. Disgust. That flip in your stomach at rotten meat, at the smell of something wrong. That is behavioral immunity. Ancient software that pulled your ancestors' hand back from the poison before they ever bit in. And when something bad did get in, the body had a brutal exit plan. Vomiting, diarrhea, unpleasant. Also the fastest way to throw a toxin out the door. And underneath all of it, memory. Survive a disease once, and your immune system files it away. So the second time it recognizes the enemy at the gate and crushes it before you even feel sick. That is not a metaphor. That is the exact trick every vaccine borrows. Your ancestors ran a primitive version of it every single time they lived through something. Clotting, pain, fever, swelling, disgust, memory. That was the emergency room. No walls, no staff, no name. It was built into the body, and you're carrying the whole thing right now. But here's where it gets interesting. They were not just passive patients waiting for their own biology to save them. They reached outside the body too, and they were doing it earlier than you think. There is a tree that grows near water almost everywhere humans have lived. The willow. Chew its bark, and you're chewing a chemical called salicin. Salicin is the great-grandfather of aspirin. Pain, fever, swelling. The willow quietly handled all three, thousands of years before anyone wrote down the word medicine. The Egyptians used it. The Sumerians used it. And the knowledge is almost certainly far older than anyone who wrote it down. Now go further back. Much further. A Neanderthal in a cave in Spain, 48,000 years ago. We know he was in agony because we found his jaw, and it carries the scar of a dental abscess. We know his gut was infected with a parasite, and we know what he was putting in his mouth, because it is still stuck in the plaque on his teeth, preserved as DNA for 50,000 years. He was eating poplar. Poplar contains salicylic acid, the painkiller, and in the same plaque, traces of a mould, penicillium, a natural antibiotic. Natural? Sit with that. A Neanderthal with a toothache and a gut infection was chewing painkiller and antibiotic mold, more than 40,000 years before we invented either one. He did not know the chemistry. He knew that this one helped. Or take the most famous patient in the world, Ötzi, a man frozen in a glacier 5,000 years ago, so well preserved we can read his last meal and his tattoos. Around his neck he carried a fungus, birch polypore, and in his gut, whipworm, a parasite that would have twisted his stomach. That fungus is poison to the worm. He was carrying his own medicine on a cord, ready to use. They packed wounds with honey, which really does kill bacteria. They let maggots clean the dead flesh out of a wound, a trick armies rediscovered on the battlefield thousands of years later. They set broken bones, they burned a wound shut to stop the bleeding, and then there's the one that stops people cold. They drilled holes in the skull. It is called trepanation, and it is the oldest surgery we know of. Someone takes a sharp stone and opens a living person's head down to the brain. It sounds like a death sentence. It sounds like the darkest, most hopeless corner of the ancient world. Here's the part nobody expects. Most of them survived. We know, because bone tells the truth. When you cut bone and the person dies, the edges stay sharp forever. But when the person lives, the bone begins to heal. The edges soften, smooth, grow back over. And across ancient skulls with holes drilled in them, from France to Peru, the majority show that healing. Survival rates of 70–80%, higher than European hospitals managed in the 1800s. Some skulls were opened 2 or 3 separate times and healed each time. Whatever they were doing up there, and we honestly are not sure why, the patient usually walked away. But the single most powerful medicine your ancestors had was not a plant or a fungus or a stone blade. It was each other. In a cave in Iraq, we found a Neanderthal we call Shanidar one. He was, by any measure, wrecked, deaf, blind in one eye. His right arm withered and at some point gone below the elbow, damage to both legs. And every one of those injuries had healed. He lived into his 40s like this, which means one thing. A deaf, half-blind, one-armed man does not feed himself, does not defend himself, does not survive a single winter alone in that world. Somebody carried him. For years. Somebody brought him food and kept him warm and stood between him and the dark, long after he could give anything back. That is medicine, too. Maybe the first medicine. Not a cure. Just, we do not leave you behind. So the picture's starting to look almost warm. The clever body, the healing plants, the surgery that worked, the group that carried its broken. You might be thinking, maybe they were fine. Maybe the whole life was short and brutal thing is a lie. And here is one place where it genuinely is a lie. You have heard that ancient people died at 30. That number is real, and it is deeply misleading. It is an average, and it is being dragged down hard by babies. So many infants and small children died that the math just collapses. But if you made it past childhood, past 15, the most common age of death was around 72. Old people were not rare. Gray hair existed. Grandparents existed, and they mattered, and they carried the knowledge of which bark, which fungus, which wound you could come back from. But do not let it get too warm, because the rest of the truth is hard. They died. Constantly. Of things you would not even take a day off work for. A cut that went septic. A tooth that abscessed and poisoned the blood. A bout of diarrhea that emptied a child of water in a single day. And childbirth. A big-headed human baby through a narrow human pelvis is one of the most dangerous things a mammal does, and it killed mothers and infants over and over and over. Their built-in emergency kit was extraordinary. It was also constantly not enough. The reason you are alive to watch this is almost certainly modern medicine. This is not a story about how we do not need doctors. We bury fewer children in a year than they buried in a lifetime, and that is the whole miracle of the last 100 years. But now, the strange part. The part that is actually about you. That ancient kit never left. It is still installed, still running, still following the old rules. And the old rules do not always fit the new world. The fever that was a weapon? The moment yours starts to climb, you reach for a pill to crush it. Sometimes you should. But the thing you are switching off is the same counterattack that saved your ancestors. The inflammation that was a rescue crew for a wound? In a modern body, sitting still, overfed, stressed, it can smolder low and constant for years. And that slow burn quietly feeds the diseases that actually kill us now. And the immune system, that brilliant memory machine, was built to spend its whole life fighting dirt and parasites and 1,000 small invaders. Raise it in a spotless world with nothing to fight, and some scientists think it gets bored, restless, and it starts swinging at things that were never a threat. Pollen, peanuts, your own body. Some of that dirt your ancestors lived in was, in a strange way, training. Same body. New world. The emergency room in your skin was tuned for cuts and hunts and hard, short lives. Not for 80 years of sitting and sugar and safety. It does not know the world changed. It just keeps opening every time on the old instructions. So, go back to that little cut. The one on your hand that you forgot about, that has been quietly sealing itself this entire time. It is doing exactly what it did in a cave 40,000 years ago. The same threads, the same net, the same ancient reflex to close the wound and hold the line. You are not as far from them as you feel. You are carrying their doctor. It never clocked out. It has just been waiting this whole time for the next small emergency and quietly handling it, the only way it has ever known how.